Made to Kill. By Zekamp. Chapter 11. Dressed to Kill. It was not much trouble to arrange for Fayette to stay at the orphanage for a bit. She still remembered all the personnel after all. The caretakers were understanding about her predicament, and so she headed off to sleep after a light meal. Fayette spent the night sleeping in the same bed as Mireille. The place was too cramped to have free beds for weary travelers, but Fayette could make do. It was nostalgic. She had forgotten how loud some of the younger children could get before bedtime, but it didn't mar her rest. She drifted off to sleep peacefully, dreaming of adventure. Fayette woke up late the next day to the sight of Mireille busy at work fixing up all the tears in her uniform's apron. The woman was a level 6 seamstress, so she had decent enough skills already. The needle swished this way and that with supernatural grace, leaving little indication there had been frays in the cloth at all. Fayette looked over to the side and saw the bright sunlight filtering through the window covering. Must be almost midday as the kids aren't around. When have I last overslept? Sloppy of me. Mireille's already gotten to work, and here I have been sleeping. I can't believe you're struggling to make ends meet with skills like that, Fayette said, yawning, as she dragged herself out from under the sheets. Mireille looked over from her work. She only needed to physically hold the needle for really precise bits, most of the time it floated through the air on its own. A perk of her skills. Just bad times to be a seamstress. With those new sewing machines coming about, there's no way for someone as low level as me to get any employment. At least in any reasonable manner. Mireille replied. I don't know what I would do if I couldn't find maid work, Fayette sighed. What? You're planning on heading out to be a hunter? Is that really maid work? Fayette hopped off the bed. I mean, I'm a maid, so if I go and do it, then of course it's maid work. What else would I be doing? Mireille had stopped sewing and was looking at Fayette with something akin to fascination. That logic is completely circular, it makes no sense at all. The maid stretched her arms. Hey, it makes sense to me, and that's all that matters. The seamstress sighed and went back to repairing the outfit. Well, if it works for you. Maybe I should consider something similar. Finished with her stretching, Fayette began making the bed. She had standards for this sort of thing. Mireille looked over from her work and furrowed her brow. By the way, should I even be repairing your maid clothes? Are you really planning on going monster hunting in a skirt and apron? Fayette turned back, horror on her face. What? You want me to wear pants or something? No way in hell, that would be absolutely scandalous. Hey! Language! Fayette turned back to folding the sheets and rolled her eyes. The girl is 17 and still sticking to orphanage rules like that. She really needs to get out of here. Sooner the better. I'm a maid, so obviously I'm going to be wearing a maid's uniform. That's that. Haven't you heard of the saying, the right clothes for the right job? Fayette nodded her head. Of course a maid uniform is the right clothing for every job after all. Mireille shook her head and lifted up the apron she had been repairing, showing how it no longer had any tears on it. Well, I'm pretty much done with your precious uniform now, so do give it a try. It was a right mess. I actually got a level up from repairing it. Oh, nice. Did you get a new skill for level 7? Mireille grinned and eyed Fayette's figure, covered only in a thin chemise. I got a very useful skill indeed. It's called Take Measurements. Suddenly Fayette felt as if the seamstress's gaze was piercing, and she shivered. Wait, what exactly do you think you are measuring? Don't worry, I already measured you up much earlier. You are certainly growing in all the right places. Don't worry, I made proper adjustments for your clothes. Hey! Don't use skills like that on me without asking. The seamstress made her best attempt at an innocent expression. I was just repairing your outfit out of the goodness of my heart, and I didn't dare wake you from your rest. She batted a few innocent eyelashes at the maid. It was only for the sake of the clothes, all right. Fayette groaned and went back to folding the bed sheets. Fine, fine, have it your way. Just ask me next time, all right. Fayette finished making the bed, and Mireille put the stack of mended clothes on top of it. Fayette looked over the clothes, curious. Her apron and bodice had taken the most damage, but she could not find any traces of the damage anymore. It was almost as good as new. Do be a bit careful with them from now on, Mireille said as she followed Fayette's gaze. Mend doesn't make fabric out of nothing, so it's all a bit thinner than it was before. Should still be good for a while though. Fayette nodded her thanks, then began putting the clothes on. First, she pulled on her stockings, and fixed them in place with garters laced just below the knee. Next, she took up her corset, and started lacing it down from the front. It was a snug fit, quite a bit more comfortable than it had been just yesterday. All right, maybe I'll forgive her using that take measures skill. This is comfy. Next was a white petticoat, and then the black wool skirt over it. The weather was starting to get colder, so the thick wool was welcome. With that done, all that remained was putting on her black wool bodice, tucking it into the skirt, then putting on her apron. Now her basic outfit was complete. That is quite a lot of layers for something you plan on moving a lot in, Mireille said, observing the process. Do you have my collar and headwear somewhere? They weren't with the rest of the clothes. Fayette asked. What, are you planning on putting them on today? I thought those were only for formal occasions. Fayette sighed. This was a conversation she had gone through quite often at the manor. Look, I can't just leave an outfit incomplete like that. I just like having everything on at all times, the complete set. Mireille quirked an eyebrow at that, but offered no further questions. Well, the rest is in the box under the bed. They hadn't really suffered any damage at all anyways, they were fine with just a wash. Fayette pulled out the box and smiled as she saw the missing pieces. She quickly set the collar on her bodice, then tied up her hair into a quick knot and put on headwear. At last, she felt complete. She did a few experimental stretches and found that it actually felt a bit easier to move around in than before. Hey, this actually feels different, less resistance to movement and stuff. I'm not a seamstress for nothing, you know. You could have told me about that magical bag in the pocket though, almost broke a needle on it. Ah, sorry. Slipped my mind. Well, nothing to it. Put your boots on, we've got a busy day ahead of us. We do. After a quick breakfast the pair set off towards the forest. Fayette could not help herself from staring at Mireille as she gracefully moved through the trees. She was another person who always moved decisively, she did not miss any steps or stop to look for the way. No, she just moved on, steadily. Fayette was a bit clumsier, stumbling over the odd stump here and there. Still, she managed to keep pace and did not fall behind. Much at least. Hey, I put some buttons in your skirt so you can pull it up for ease of movement. Makes it a lot easier to move around, Mireille said as she watched Fayette's skirt catch on a branch, causing her to stumble over another stump. Fayette got back her footing and glared at her. Hey, I'm not going to start flashing my ankles around or anything, all right? A proper skirt is kept at a proper length. Mireille rolled her eyes. Well, have it your way then. I guess you did manage to make it work yesterday. Today, the seamstress had focused on practicality with her clothes. Her brown skirt flitted a lot more freely than Fayette's, and she was wearing a loose button-down blouse as her top. Fayette however was resolute with her choice of outfit. She would not be dissuaded by some branches and brambles. They stopped every now and then to check over the many traps the seamstress kept here. Her work with strings and threads was good for more than just sewing, especially when aided with a basic trap setting skill. Small snares made from durable, but near invisible thread were set all over the forest. Food at the orphanage would get Sammy without some personal additions every now and then. So, what exactly is the purpose of this? Fayette asked. She had been so busy scanning the forest for any possible threats that the matter had completely slipped her mind this far. You said that you gained experience from every kill you had, didn't you? We are going to test how much what you kill matters. For example, I do get small amounts of experience from working with these snares, and of them working, but have never gained any from killing the animals like you have. You had your theory, let's test if it's true. Who knows, maybe you'll get experience from all killing. Wait, you mean? Yes, it's exactly as you imagine, Mireille responded before Fayette could form her thoughts. Look, we've caught one here, she said, pointing out the next snare. A large hare was caught in it, struggling against the knot it had gotten caught in. Mireille smiled, then turned to Fayette. Looks like we'll be eating some extra meat today. Kill that, and we'll see if you get any experience. Chapter 12. What exactly counts as cleaning? Mireille eyed the hare as it struggled in the snare. She licked her lips, then pushed Fayette towards the struggling animal. All right, let's see how far you can take this cleaning thing of yours. This is pretty different from killing monsters, Fayette responded, eyeing the hare with just a bit of apprehension. Mireille shrugged. They are pests for gardens, are they not? It's worth a try. Fayette still wasn't completely convinced. She had never come along on these hunts of Mireille's before, but she was a new woman now. A prospective hunter wouldn't shy away from hunting. The maid took up her broom, readied it, then slammed it right at the hare. She missed. The hare had managed to kick itself just a bit off the path of the hit. Fayette narrowed her eyes. Taunting her, was it? Well, she had a lot more broom to give. She took up her broom, then hit again. This time, however, she did not stop. No, she kept hitting. The first strikes were still misses, but then she got the creature, right on the head. The next 5 hits were a lot easier to hit. So were the 2 after those. Fayette only stopped when she felt a drop of blood splash against her uniform, which made her recoil away from the creature instinctively. Though creature was putting it a bit generously, little more than bloody pulp remained. As her mind cleared, Fayette realized that she may have gone too far. She turned to Mireille and made an attempt at her best disarming smile. Hey, I got it. The seamstress was staring at the remains of the hare with a complicated expression on her face, as if she couldn't choose between fascination, resignation, and horror. That you did. The creature was plenty dead after the first strike. She turned her eyes to Fayette. I don't think the next 10 served much purpose. It wasn't 10, but yet, my bad. Let's call it being thorough. Monsters are easy, they just go pop when they're done. These ones, it's a lot harder to tell, you know. Fayette said as she pointed at her handiwork. Mireille turned her eyes back to the bloody pulp. Really now? I think it was a bit of a clue when it stopped moving. You never know if it's playing dead, and waiting for a chance to escape or something. That's how they get you in the stories. Always be thorough. Mireille shook her head and turned to walk away. I don't think we're going to be making lunch of that. I'm impressed you managed to mangle it that bad with just a broom, to be honest. Besides, we've gotten sidetracked. Did it work? Get any progress on your leveling? Oh, right. Fayette closed her eyes and tried to focus on how her class was feeling. She did not hear any system notification, but maybe that just meant the experience gain was too small to be noted? Or maybe it was taking its time. No, I don't think that's it. This just doesn't feel right. There had been that certain feeling of cleanliness, that satisfaction that she had felt with the other kills, but she did not get the same feeling here. It did not feel like she was cleaning anything. Was that indeed the key? The maid opened her eyes and looked at the remains. This hare was in its natural place, running about in the woods. There was no disorder here, no grime or wrongness to be cleaned away like there had been with all those others. Hares moving about the woods is part of the natural order, so it wasn't an issue. Maybe if they were invading a garden en masse, I might change my perspective. Would I then gain experience? Probably. Nope, I don't think I got one bit of experience for that, Fayette finally said, exhaling the breath she had not realized she had been holding. Well, to be honest, I expected that. But as you said, there is no harm in being thorough, Mireille admitted, walking on. Come on, let's go, we've still got more traps to clear. What, more tests? Yes, but not for you. For me. I want to try a few things too. Suddenly more interested, Fayette followed while wiping the blood off the end of her broom. Gah, is that a bit of skull lodged in there? Why can't everything just dissolve away like monsters? Cleaning afterwards would be so much easier. The pair continued their forest stroll and checked out more traps. Most were still empty, so Mireille just gathered the threads to take along. You're taking them all away? Why? Fayette asked, curious. Well, the caretakers have been dropping hints for quite a while. I'm going to be leaving the orphanage soon. No sense leaving these here. Oh, right. You are leaving. You could leave them for the other kids or something, couldn't you? What? These are my snares, good material. I'm not leaving them for someone else. I guess that's fair. Where are you going to go? You told me there's no work in these parts. Where else? The city. I have to at least take a look at what the offerings are like in Pelagny. If all else fails, I can always go apply for a class change. Fayette grimaced. She had always found the idea unsettling, to just change what you are. You shouldn't be so quick to change, you're not even level 10 yet. You wouldn't be getting the leveling bonus for the new class. The woman turned back and gave her a severe look. It's still more efficient for me to change right away, at least until I gain a few more levels. Well, Mary the cook, she's dead now. I heard her say that the lines for appointments have been packed lately. It could take long for the church to get to you. Mireille turned back forward. That is true. Look, Faye. It's not like I want to change my class or anything, all right? I do like being a seamstress, but you need money to live. Fayette felt at her pockets. Mireille, I got a good bit from the manor. I could. No, Mireille answered instantly, not letting the maid get started at all. I'm not relying on handouts to live one bit more. Fayette sighed. The girl could be particular about the strangest things. It would be just for a bit, you wouldn't have to. No, I'll do fine on my own. Let's just end this conversation, all right? Look, the next snares actually have prey. That they did, 2 hares had been caught right next to each other. The seamstress eyed her catch with a gleam in her eyes, then took out some needle and thread. Perfect, I wanted to test something like this. What exactly are you testing? Fayette asked, cautious of that gleam. Mireille did not answer. She approached the hares, then threw her sewing needle at them. Sorry about this, quick stitch. The needle began to glow, then pierced the fur of one hare, taking a long thread with it. It exited, then moved to the other one and repeated the process, zigzagging between the two, then tightening. The hares cried out and struggled, but it was futile. Fayette winced as the 2 struggling animals were stitched together in a flash. Mireille had a thoughtful expression on her face as she looked at her work. Sorry, good animals, but it was a necessary test. I'll let you out of your misery. She approached them and snapped their necks with practiced ease. She turned to the wide-eyed maid. Look. This is how you don't ruin your dinner. What was that about? You sewed them together. That I did. Mireille answered as she began untangling the now stitched together animals from the snares. You talked about how you fought using your maid skills, so I wanted to see if I could do the same. Worked surprisingly well, to be honest. Guess there's not much difference between leather and skin. Counts as material for needlework all the same. I guess that makes sense. Did you gain experience from it? Not the act of killing itself, no. Guess the whole breed a bunch of animals and power level by killing them plan is off for the both of us. There was such a plan. Mireille ignored her. But I do feel the rest is treated just like any other needlework. The more challenging it is, the more experience you get. She turned to Fayette. I imagine the danger factor from trying to sew a monster's legs together would prove for very effective leveling. Fayette's eyes narrowed. Are you thinking of becoming a hunter too? The woman shrugged. How good is the pay? Fayette blanked out for a second as she thought. I don't actually have any idea. What? You're thinking of becoming one without any idea on what the pay is like? I don't really worry about things like that. I'm mainly doing it for the experience. You are too cavalier about all this. Alright, next thing, back to the orphanage, then we brainstorm skill leveling plans. The pair bickered along for quite a bit on their way back to the orphanage. Chapter 13 Skill Planning Session. After they had returned to the orphanage and taken their catch to the kitchen, the pair headed out to the field outside for some practice. A few kids came to loiter about and watch, but Mireille chased them away. She seemed to be a bit of an authority figure, as the kids didn't approach again. So, how exactly does a maid fight? Mireille asked, arms crossed. If you're going to run off and be a hunter, you have to have plans for dealing with all sorts of monsters. Fayette suspected she was doing her best impression of some of the stricter orphanage caretakers while they were giving lessons. It was rather cute, really. I guess I'll humor her a bit. Well, I've got my sweep dust skill, surprisingly effective actually. I did manage to get one kobold with it. Fayette wanted to demonstrate, so she set her broom on the ground and activated the skill. Alright, watch this. Fayette swept the broom back and forth on the dry ground, sending a nice cloud of dust flying. Mireille stared blankly. Oh, right, that didn't look too impressive I guess. That was not all of course. It's at rank 3, so I can do a bit more. If I really push on the skill. Fayette concentrated, charging up the sweep dust instead of releasing it immediately. Dust from the ground began to be pulled to the broom, resulting in a roiling mass gathering around it. Judging the dust cloud to be sufficient, Fayette finished the skill with a whisk of her broom, sending the dust cloud flying forward. She stood back with just a hint of pride. Now, that is useful in a fight. Puts the skill on a bit of a cooldown, but it is worth it. Mireille however still did not seem too impressed. So, there's weapon number 1 for you, throwing some dust at the enemy. Good for a distraction I suppose. Fayette glared. Underestimating a maid are you? She waited for just a few seconds, then flicked a sweep dust at the seamstress. Surprised, Mireille went into a coughing fit as dust got all over her eyes and mouth, and Fayette walked forward, pinching her by the ear. Ow, ow, stop. Fine, I get it. Fayette smiled, then helped brush the rest of the dust off. As long as you understand. It would have been quite easy to broom you on the head there, you know. Mireille took a step back, trying to regain her strict caretaker aura, but it was rather diminished. Alright then, I'll admit that one does work. What else do you have? The maid nodded. I've got cutlery control, which also helped me take out a kobold. Watch this. She picked up a few forks and knives from her apron of holding and proceeded to throw them at a nearby tree using cutlery control. They moved accurately right where she was aiming, but only one managed to pierce through the bark, most just bounced off wholesale. Mireille's voice remained skeptic. So, your next combat technique is throwing some kitchenware? How exactly did you kill so many kobolds with skills like these? Fayette glared again, and Mireille flinched back, covering her eyes. Okay, maybe those are good too. The maid sighed, then had to slump a bit. To be honest, her knives really weren't that powerful. Mostly just accurate. No, you might be right. Most of the time I either distracted them with something like that and then whacked them dead with my broom, or I used my special cleaning agents. Your alchemy skills are definitely nothing to sneeze at, that is true. Besides, you have to have some fighting instincts and strength behind you. No ordinary girl with a broom could batter foes down like that, the seamstress said, face scrunched up in thought. Still, how much do you have left in alchemy supplies? I imagine you used up quite a bit. Well, I can get the stuff needed for more all-purpose cleaner pretty easily, but I can't really use that gas reaction thing anymore. I used all of that shiny stone I had. I'm not sure I can find more of that. A suspicious eye turned to Fayette. How did you find that original piece? It clearly wasn't anything ordinary. The maid began fidgeting. Well, you know how nobility are. Mages are always carrying around weird stuff, and sometimes they drop that weird stuff while passed out at a party, and don't come to collect later. Surely, it's not wrong of me to collect them. Faye, are you sure that's how proper maid etiquette works? I thought you were very particular about that kind of thing. You practically confessed to robbery. No, it's no such thing. He didn't come back looking, so he probably didn't even miss it much. It's just safekeeping really. Look, let's just get back to the battle training. This is battle training, right? I also have maid's poise which helps me stay balanced, and cleaning tool proficiency. She twirled her broom in one hand. That skill is why I'm fighting with a broom, I can't handle a sword after all. Mireille nodded. Good thinking. You should probably max out both of those skills. They sound like solid combat options and could upgrade to something good when you class up. That's true. They are both at rank 3 anyways, so it wouldn't take much. I've got one skill point free right now, should I put it in? Mireille nodded. If you just keep it around, it does give some flexibility to situations. But using points earlier lets you get used to them better. Fayette nodded, and focused for a moment. Skill up, cleaning tool proficiency has reached rank 4. She twirled the broom around in her hand, and it felt even easier than before. She wouldn't be losing her grip lightly. All right, done. Did you have anything else in mind? Mireille thought for a moment. You got to level 10, right? Do you have any plans for your new general skill slot? Fayette nodded. Yeah, I've been thinking on getting something combat-oriented for it, but I haven't really been able to choose. I like having it open as an option, to be honest. I've been keeping my general skills at rank 1 so I can try them out while having the option to swap them out easily. Maybe you should do something similar. What kind of skill do you think I should pick? Well, if you want to be flexible, maybe something to help avoid surprises? Can't really react if you get ambushed. Staying alive is always the #1 priority, and surprises can be nasty. Do you have anything like that available? Fayette closed her eyes and focused. Just a moment, I'll check. She thought of getting a new general skill, and instantly her mind was filled with the options she had unlocked. Free skill slot available. Listing options. Cutting board. Dallying about. Dancing proficiency. Danger sense. Dark vision, lesser. Determined will. Fayette's mind was filled with options, but she focused on the one that looked very appropriate. This should do just fine. She thought of taking it. You have gained a new skill, danger sense. Danger sense. The world is full of danger, but with this new skill you can sense it coming. Get forewarning on attacks, traps, and other dangers outside of your notice. Noticing ambushes has never been easier. All right. I took something just now. Danger sense. Fayette said as she opened her eyes. Though I don't feel any different. Suddenly Mireille threw a needle right at Fayette's face, and the maid felt a new kind of alarm go through her. She moved her head out of the way just in time, though the needle did stop mid-air, a good distance before it would have hit anything. Seems to be working fine. Mireille said as she called the needle back into her hand. Fayette took some deep breaths to calm herself from the sudden shock. Hey! Don't scare me like that. The seamstress raised an eyebrow. You wanted to see if it was working, didn't you? Now we know. I don't think it would have worked if I had warned you in advance. Fayette knew the woman wasn't lying, but still felt a tad bitter about it. She gave her a proper mean glare as words didn't seem to work. That was for the dust in the face, wasn't it? Mireille did look a bit apologetic. Well, maybe a bit. Sorry. Let's move on then. Didn't you also have one other new skill? Some charm type thing? Fayette nodded. Well, yes. Disarming smile. I'm not sure how I feel about it, to be honest. Not really the type of skill I generally use. It should ease people's hearts or something like that. Hey, don't neglect such a useful sounding skill. If you don't use it and don't put skill points in it, it might change into something else. Mireille tapped her head thoughtfully. Let's have you use it while reserving inns and the sort. We could get some discounts. Fayette paused for a moment as her thoughts churned. Wait, we're going together. Mireille looked at the maid for a good few seconds, completely stunned. What, you were planning some sort of expedition of your own? I need go to Pelagny to look for a job, you need to go there to register as a hunter. Of course we're going together. Oh, right. The closest hunters guild is over there. Where exactly was I planning to go? Well, more importantly. Fayette rushed to embrace the seamstress in a crushing embrace. You're coming with me. No, stop. Let me go. You've got it the wrong way. I'm not coming with you, you are coming with me. The seamstress corrected as she struggled away. That confused Fayette enough to release her. Wait, there's a difference. Of course there's a difference. You haven't planned for this at all, have you? I have. I've already sent word that we'll be going with the next grain shipment blimp. It'll be leaving in 2 days. Ah, true. Going with the blimp is the smart move. Don't tell me you were planning on walking the whole way. Fayette stayed silent for a few seconds. No. I wasn't really thinking of anything yet. Thought I could take a few more days off. The look Mireille gave her was not one of respect. Will you really be fine as a hunter? Fayette crossed her arms. I've been to the city plenty of times, you're the one who has never left this place. The argument went on for quite a while, but it was not a serious argument. Fayette was feeling happy she had gained a traveling companion. Walking the forest path all alone would have been so troublesome. New party member acquired. Mireille. Class, Seamstress, Tier 1. Level, 7. Skills. Needlecraft, 2/4. Quick Stitch, Rank 2. Needle Control, Rank 4. Tailoring, 3/4. Adjust Garments, Rank 2. Mend, Rank I. Take Measurements, Rank I. Capstone Skills, 0/0. N/A. Free Skills, 2/2. Basic Trap Setting, Rank I. Lesser Enhanced Endurance, Rank I. Unspent Skill Points, 1. Chapter 14 Interlude, Mireille's 3 Secrets. The days passed fast, and soon it was time to leave for Pelagny on the blimp. Mireille, however, was feeling a bit nervous. She eyed the gangplank to the blimp with apprehension. The blimp was getting ready to leave, floating just a few feet off the ground. A few feet higher than Mireille had ever been. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, kept her hand on the railing, then walked. It was only 10 steps, but it was still nerve-wracking. Finally, she felt her foot hit blimp's wooden deck. What's taking you so long? It's only a blimp. Are you nervous? A voice asked from behind her. The seamstress opened her eyes and looked back. Of course I'm not nervous, you just have to. She looked at the deck she was standing on, then up. She pointed up. You have to make sure the balloon is in good condition when you step on a blimp, you know. It's part of my class. What, really? Is it in good condition? Fayette asked, suddenly eyeing the balloon with wariness. Good, looks like she bought it. Mireille turned to examine the balloon. Firm leather, and tight seams. Nothing looked out of place. Everything seems to be in order, let us proceed. First secret, Mireille really wasn't as cool and composed as she strove to make herself seem, but she would never let Fayette see that. She had her pride to maintain. She made a brave effort of stepping forwards, but still found herself clinging to the railings along the cabin wall. She did not like the loss of control. The solid ground beneath one's feet was one of the constants in this world that you could trust. She did not like handing over that trust to any artificial ground. If it were to fail, there was little she could do. Gee, the wind got your hair all tangled again. Give me a moment. Fayette said as she followed her in and began tidying up her hair. The familiar, comforting touch managed to ease her nerves, and Mireille felt herself relaxing. The others at the orphanage had always found Fayette's fussy habits tiresome, but Mireille had never felt that way. She had always felt it was rather calming, really. In fact, her hair had not gotten tangled up by the wind at all. That was secret number 2. Her hair was not actually that tangly by nature. Rather, she always made sure to mess it up just a bit whenever Fayette was around. That girl grew nervous whenever there wasn't anything to clean up. All clear. Get ready for takeoff. A voice shouted out. Mireille clung to the railing tighter as she felt a lurch in her stomach. Hey, it's your first time flying, right? You should really go take in the views. The first time is always special. Fayette said as she finished getting the tangled hair in order. I suppose you're right. Mireille sighed. There was truth in that, she had to admit. It wouldn't do to hunker down like some scared mouse. She pushed herself off the cabin wall and walked to the bow of the craft. A vast horizon spread out before her. Mireille felt her breath catch as she saw the familiar terrain spread out below her. She could almost make out some of her favorite spots in the woods, and seeing them all from this perspective reminded her of how small it all was. It's such a vast world out there, and here I have been, stuck in this small corner all my life. She turned to look at her friend, who was looking at the landscape, a bright smile on her face. It was the expression of someone setting out on an adventure, an expression of freedom. Mireille envied it just a bit. Can that girl really become a hunter? I don't think things will be as simple as she thinks. Mireille had to admit that there was a certain appeal to the path of a hunter. It was not a symbol of freedom in stories for nothing. No superior to bind you, no schedule to adhere to, no hometown to trap you. That was how it went in all the stories. Secret number 3, Mireille was actually tempted by the career of a hunter. She knew the stories were exaggerations, and reality would disappoint, but still. There had to be a grain of truth there. The stories had to come from somewhere. But would it really be like that? I can't imagine. It's too different from any other organizations. Even the orphanage manages to devolve into a mess of bickering factions at times. What would a powerful guild look like? Still, it's not like my path is much better. Still, she was not like Fayette. She wouldn't rush to a new path without carefully considering the alternative. These days, it felt like everyone was heading out to the big cities. There had to be some sort of reason for that, right? She would see for herself before forming any judgments. But, she would add the path of a hunter to the list. It needed investigation too. A seamstress had limited options these days. She hoped that pay in the city would be good enough to get some savings going, but that was not a sure thing. Opening her own boutique would take a lot of levels and funds, things she did not have yet. Based on the news, even level 25 seamstress classes were not that in value, especially if they held the wrong specializations. A sewing machine needed no levels to work, and could match lower level classes easily. When someone then got actual specializations that worked with the machine, the output of a normal seamstress was just not comparable at all. I really ought to give the man who invented those machines a piece of my mind. Hey, what are you spacing out for? Here, I've got sandwiches. Shaken out of her brooding, Maid turned to look at the sandwich her friend was offering. She gave it a good, dubious stare. It's been quite a while since I've tasted your cooking. She narrowed her eyes. Something was off here. You're a maid, aren't you? Why haven't I tasted your cooking for so long? Ah, well, there were other people for that at the mansion, so I never got to do any cooking there, Fayette admitted, blushing slightly. She steadied her expression, then pushed the sandwich over. Still, I am a maid after all, and cooking is a maid's work. From now on, I'll be doing the cooking for us. Well, all right then. Maid said as she took the sandwich. White bread with some chicken in between by all measures, it looked like quite the delicious sandwich. Fayette bit into her own one with relish. Ah, that hits the spot. They never did get the seasoning right at the mansion, I wonder why the cooks never listened to me. The maid seemed to be enjoying hers well enough, so Maid decided to give her own a try. She brought it to her mouth and gave it a good bite. Her eyes instantly watered. Spicy. So damn spicy. Is this why they never let her cook? Does she actually enjoy this? Maid brushed the tears out of her face and looked at her friend. Fayette seemed to be enjoying the meal a lot, at least based on the smile on her face. The seamstress realized that she was in trouble. She just said she's going to do all the cooking, and I don't think I can get her to budge on that. She can get very particular about her way and views being the only right ones. I'll be in danger if I let things go on like this. I'll have to act. She spun her mind into overdrive, letting the thoughts whirl and knit a plan into form. She had worked on Fayette's uniform just a bit before, and she knew the spices were probably somewhere in there. She had her plan. First, a distraction. Hey, Fayette, look! Is that a spilled drink on the deck over there? She shouted out while vaguely pointing at a random point on the deck. The maid instantly perked up. What? Cleaning work? Where? And turned to look to where Maid had been pointing. Next, the heist. Needle control. A needle with some thread attached to it started to silently creep towards the maid's apron. Maid felt the cloth make contact with her needle, letting her skills work on the threads within. She closed her eyes to focus. Adjust garments, take measurements. She was very familiar with this piece of clothing, so it was not difficult at all to get a mental picture of the various pockets and pouches around it, and how the things inside those pockets felt. The subtle ways in which the cloth was weighed down let her search for her target. This one, maybe? A small packet, with something grainy inside? The pocket isn't being weighed down much by it, could be her spice stash. The needle moved through the apron like a viper hiding in the grass, slipping through seams and openings. Maid moved it carefully, taking care to not alert the maid. Eventually she felt it near her target and managed to hook a thread through the packet. A few quick shortcuts were made and closed with adjust garments, allowing her to pull the packet back right through the clothing, into her waiting hands. The openings closed behind as the packet moved, leaving no traces of the thievery. She confirmed that it indeed was a packet of spices, and quickly hid it into her pocket. Wow, that was some superb needlework. Keep up the practice. Progress towards next level, 30%. Maid was pleased to hear the messages. Interesting, looks like offensive needlework has some good potential indeed. She generally got levels from anything in which she used her needlework, the class was rather loose about that. However, finding new challenges for a seamstress was difficult, and she often had to get creative. The whole process had taken only about 4 seconds, and Fayette was none the wiser. Her face was one of confusion as she tried to find the spilled drink. Maid used the extra time she had to tangle her hair up a bit now that she had awakened the girl's cleaning instincts. It would be best to give her something to work on. Eventually Fayette turned back. Maid, I don't see anything. Where is it? Oh, don't worry about it, I guess I was just seeing things. Gosh, look. Your hair's gotten all tangled again. Let me fix that. Mireille leaned back into the familiar hands as they began the usual ritual. I guess it would be a shame if she just ran off somewhere far away. How much do they pay hunters anyway? I guess I do really have to consider that seriously. Besides, can I really leave this girl alone? The airship traveled on, and a few days later, arrived at the city of Palagni. Chapter 15 Welcome to Palagni. The city of Palagni was situated on a low ridge between two rivers, just a bit upstream of their intersection. It was a changing city. Little remained of the trading hub that had been there just 50 years ago. Houses spread out haphazardly from the more orderly city center, and the huge factory district was full of pipes billowing out thick, black smoke. Fayette grimaced as the errant wind brought some of the smoke to their descending blimp. The smoke stung her eyes and sent her into a coughing fit. I swear this place wasn't quite this bad the last time I visited, it's only been a year, she managed to say in the midst of her coughing. She waved the smoke away from in front of her face and cast a hateful glare at the factories responsible. Shouldn't someone be in charge of cleaning this stuff out? What kind of person just lets their grime float away? Mireille walked beside her, holding a handkerchief to cover her nose and mouth. I imagine it would be very convenient if all trash just floated away. Wouldn't that make a maid's work easier? You could just toss everything out the window. Fayette looked at her friend, exasperated. You are thinking very short-term here. It's like when you clear old, decrepit furniture to the attic. It's not like that stuff is going to just disappear, right? It's still up there, some poor maid is going to have to deal with it eventually. Mireille was staring at Fayette as if she was a whole new human being. I honestly didn't know you put that much thought into this stuff. Fayette glared at her. Hey, I'm not a maid for nothing, all right? I trust your judgment related to clothing things, so you should trust me with cleaning things. Mireille quirked an eyebrow. You trust me with clothes? Didn't you just go on a whole spiel against me with your whole maid outfit obsession? That's different. A maid's work uniform is a maid's business. I doubt others would understand. Mireille shook her head and turned back to the city. Whatever. I won't argue this further. Still, this is not quite how I imagined the grand city of Palagni to look. Mireille said, enunciating those last words mockingly. Quite different from the paintings and stories. Well, we'll be landing soon enough. You'll get a much closer look. Trust me, the smoke is only the beginning. Soon enough the pair had landed at the airship docks and got the pleasure of dealing with customs. It was a bothersome process, but not arduous. Their class licenses were in order after all. Soon they were walking to the city proper. The airship docks were at the edge of the old quarter, so the initial impression of the city was of grandness. Picturesque stone buildings were lined with elaborate engravings. Streets were busy with rushing carriages and smartly dressed pedestrians. Mireille looked at the buildings curiously. The stone was distinctly blackened, giving the district a gloomy feel. I think I've seen a painting of this very crossing back at the orphanage. Shouldn't all this stone be grey? You can thank those for that. Fayette answered, pointing at the stacks of rising smoke. I think they clean up the facades every now and then. Or at least they used to. Come in, let's move. The seamstress seemed a bit out of it as she followed Fayette. The streets were crowded. They had to squeeze between street peddlers and pedestrians. Quite different from the sparse countryside. It is quite something, isn't it? Fayette said, with just a twinge of smugness. A country gal like Mireille, of course the big city would be a bit much for her. Do not worry, for your big sister is here to help. Mireille seemed to sense the internal gloating, at least based on the skeptical gaze she gave to the maid. So, you've been here before, right? Where to? Securing lodgings is our first order, right? Well, we can of course go to the usual place. We'll just have to head this way and we'll soon be at the Grand Hotel Bella Ri. Fayette suddenly stopped, right in the middle of turning to the street. The Grand Hotel what? It sounds like a lovely place. Shan't we go? Mireille asked with an innocent voice. Fayette coughed awkwardly. Well. It might be just a tad outside our budget range. She turned away from Morel, suddenly deeply interested in studying an elaborate stone fountain. I was part of the Lord's procession the last time I visited. So, you know, the establishment I was at last may not really work. Mireille laughed. I was expecting something like this. Well, nothing to it, let's go search for a good inn. Do you have any leads? Not really, but this district is definitely too expensive. We'll want to head down to the worker district. Getting out of the old district wasn't a long walk, as though the old district was grand, it was also small and dense. It was a quick change, one you could almost feel in the atmosphere of the place. Or maybe it was just the smell. Stone was replaced with red brick, and the streets got even less clean. Ragged people started lining the streets, trying to peddle wares or services. I'm a level 8 apprentice blacksmith. I can sharpen your knives for a good price. Level 14 seamstress here, clothes need any mending? You'll get it cheap. These were but a few cries among many. The sides of the streets were absolutely packed. Some were managing to make deals with the passerbys, but many more were left hanging. Fayette felt her eye twitching wherever she looked, the whole place was sending jitters down her spine. Just the smell was enough to annoy her, but what got to her more was the general disorder. A proper household was in order. This place, however. One could hardly expect a disorderly realm to have an orderly lord. Where are the maids? Is nobody sweeping the streets? There weren't this many beggars last time. Is the lord of this place a complete incompetent buffoon? She almost felt an urge to pull out her broom and start cleaning the streets personally, but she held back. Other matters came first. Doesn't seem too promising, Mireille said, eyeing the crowds with calculation. It wasn't this bad last time, I wonder what's changed. Fayette responded. We really are lacking up-to-date information, Mireille said thoughtfully. She ran her eyes by the street and noticed a newspaper hawker. Just a moment, I'll go buy us a newspaper. She ran off, and a moment later was back, newspaper in hand. Let's see here, she mumbled as she scanned the headlines. Unrest in colonies, tea shipment destroyed, tax hikes necessary to deal with growing debt, war with Burgundy at an end, Church assures that class change processes will be sped up. Wait a minute. Fayette interrupted. We were at war? And now it's over. Mireille went back to the headline in question. Doesn't seem to be anything too major. Some minor skirmish maybe? It says a few towns are now in our rightful hands, but not much more than that. Hey, strange. Hard to imagine that some parts of this country are at war with how things are here. Mireille eyed the beggars lining the streets. I'm not so sure about that. Now in a more affordable district, the two started looking for a proper inn. They however soon ran into an issue. They wanted to have a proper, cleansing bathing session after their journey, but inns with bathing facilities were a lot more expensive, even here. Fayette would have been fine with paying the fare, but Mireille was strongly opposed. The seamstress made a strong argument, why not just save the money and go to the public baths instead? Fayette agreed it was a good plan, so they set off. It was a bit of a walk to the nearest public baths, they had to walk quite a bit closer to the northern riverside. The northern river was adjacent to the worker district, while the southern river hugged the old one. They soon found a promising place, and headed in. It was a nice establishment, with a combination of sauna rooms and heated bathing pools. The two paid the entry fee, then spent a good amount of time lazing about, getting rid of the strain of the journey. It was nice to take a bath after a long journey. The sun was starting to set by the time they were out. Mireille stretched her limbs lazily as she walked back to the streets, skin still letting off some steam into the air. Ah, that really did hit the spot. Let's head back to that one inn we marked, Shame it's a bit of a walk back there. Fayette looked at the side streets thoughtfully. I'm pretty sure I passed around here on some errands quite a bit on my last visit. Going through these side streets should be a bit of a shortcut. Really? They seem a bit sketchy to me. Bah, that's just what the city is like, you know? Do you really want to walk the long way? You're right. All right, let's take your route. Fayette took the lead and began weaving through the streets confidently. The crowds gradually got thinner, the vagrants shabbier, and the buildings dirtier. Miri was groggily following Fayette, dazed from the warmth of the bath, but soon started having doubts. Faye? You do know where you are going, right? I think the streets have been going a bit to the right for a while now, haven't they? Fayette stopped, and looked back. I'll be honest, I have had no idea where we have been for the last 5 or so blocks. What? Why didn't you say something? Well, I'm saying something now, aren't I? I was still holding out hope. Miri groaned, and looked at the street crossing they were standing in. All right, I think if we head to the left from here, we should get back to the bigger streets. Fayette nodded, but before the pair could leave the crossing, they were interrupted by a gruff voice. Excuse me, missus, it's not good to be lost in streets like this. A shabby man dressed in rags walked out from around a corner, dragging a wooden club behind him. Everything about him was filthy, except for his shiny bald head. Another man followed him, wearing a bizarrely clean top hat, which made for a strong contrast against his tattered tunic. The man grinned, revealing teeth like a broken piano, and held up his own club. Don't worry, ladies, we'll escort you. Don't know what disreputable folk are around these streets. Fayette flinched back from the stench the 2 men were emanating and felt at the broom in her bag of holding. The clubs they were holding at her and their threatening poses told enough. Gah, I knew these streets were in disorder, but this? She had been expecting better, but so far, the city had disappointed her. A skyline marred by thick smog, filthy streets lined with sickly beggars, and now back alleys crawling with leering thugs. Whoever was in charge here, they had failed. And someone would have to clean up afterward. Looking at the 2 armed figures blocking her way, she felt like she was back at the manor, facing kobolds. Monsters, thugs, was there really a difference? She felt a familiar, cool calm envelop her. Just like it had at the manor. Looking at the 2 men who were stepping closer, she could imagine the steps. A feint, then a quick broom to the head, skull cracked. More experience gained. So simple. So easy. Chapter 16 Cleaning the Streets. Fayette examined the 2 dirty men blocking her path with a frown on her face. She didn't feel cowed. The kobolds had been much more fearsome than these 2. Still, she was irritated that such folk could threaten civilians in the streets. Her first target for cleaning had been found. Streets are infested like this, not proper at all. If a maid let rats run about like they owned the manor, she would be dismissed before the sun was out. Who is in charge of public order here? She glanced to her side and saw that Miri was also in a guarded pose, with her left hand concealing a needle and thread and her right hand in a pocket. They locked eyes briefly, and Fayette nodded to her. Miri nodded back. They were both ready. The men meanwhile were getting frustrated at their silence. The man with the hat had been holding a club at his shoulder, but now he brought the weapon out to his front, and pointed it at Fayette. He narrowed his eyes, and spoke with a husky, slimy voice. Hey, what's the hold up, ladies? Come along now. No need to make this difficult. Fayette looked at him and the rusty nails lodged in his club dismissively. She had seen proper fighter classes in action, and this man's pose was far from what she had seen them display. If he even was a thug, he certainly wasn't high level. Fayette decided to dub the man with the top hat as Hat Man and the man with the shiny bald head Egg Man. The men briefly shared a glance, some signal passing between them. Fayette saw their bodies tense up, ready to move. Not something she planned on allowing. A proper maid is not reactive. Fayette acted fast. She felt at the broom in her apron of holding and pulled it out in one smooth motion. She let the momentum carry the broom into an overhead strike, aimed right at Hat Man. He only had a split second to react, but managed to pull the club in front for a block. The impact sent him stumbling backwards, wide-eyed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he sputtered. Fayette was not the only one acting. Mireille pulled her right hand out her pocket in a flash, throwing a cloud of something red at Eggman. Pocket spice attack. The powder covered his face in red, and he stumbled back, clutching at his eyes. Meanwhile, Fayette let her broom strike continue down behind her, hitting the street, and started channeling sweep dust. The past days had been hot and dry, leaving the streets coated with a blanket of loose dust. It made for good ammo. Fayette's broom gathered the dust into a swirling vortex, and she readied herself for a decisive thrust. Hatman looked at Fayette's broom and his eyes flashed with doubt for the first time. "Hey, wait!" Fayette did not. She thrust her broom out, and the cloud of dust was sent right into the man's face, blinding him. Having secured a moment to breathe, Fayette checked that Mireille was handling the other man fine, and she seemed to be. A thread was linking her right hand to the man's clothes, which seemed to be constricting his movements while the man struggled against them. Fayette focused back to her own quarry. "All right, she seems to be fine so far, but it's safest if I finish this quick." Hatman was stumbling around blindly as his eyes watered, unable to manage any guard at all. Fayette took it as an invitation. She steadied her footing with Maid's poise and twirled her broom around in her hand, readying the tail end for a strike. She pulled it back above her head, then brought it down, slamming the broom right at the man's head with all her force. The hat crumpled under her blow, and she felt a satisfying crunch as her broom hit the man's head. He crumpled down onto the ground, limp and unmoving. The motion felt instinctive. She stomped down on his neck, making sure he was down. She didn't really even think about it. He didn't burst into blood like the kobolds had. Suddenly, she heard the other man scream out, and Fayette flicked her gaze over. Mireille seemed to be trying to stitch the man's left arm to his torso, but her thread was not strong enough. The pain sent the man into a rage, and he ripped right through the shirt that had been constricting him. His enraged shout was a guttural, primal thing. It sent shivers down Fayette's spine. Mireille flinched back as the man suddenly rushed at her, and Fayette acted. She stepped forward, bringing her broom down on the man's shiny, bald head. Seeing the man threatening her friend gave extra strength to her blow, and the strike hit home. The man's expression turned blank, and he too fell to the ground, crumpling down like a sack of flour. Threatening Mireille like that? She moved forward to hit his head again, and it rather reminded her of cracking open an egg. Mireille watched the maid with her eyes wide, and eventually managed to force out some word when Fayette stepped back. "F. Fayette. You've killed him. 2 pieces of trash cleared, well done. Progress towards next level, 35%. Fayette leaned on her broom and inspected her work. "You're right, I just got the notification. It's harder to tell with these kobolds just go splat, while he still stays like that. I don't think I even see much blood." "Fayette, you've killed him?" Fayette turned her head, confused. "Well, yes. Of course I did." Mireille was still staring at the man. Her voice was a hiss, with an edge to it. "Fayette, they're dead." The maid raised an eyebrow, finally realizing. "Right. That isn't really normal, is it? Why did I? It had just felt so automatic. Simple and easy. Did they really deserve to die? Maybe?" Something subtle in her class twitched, like an itch at her back. "What's done is done." She sighed. "Is that bad?" Mireille took a deep breath, and finally turned to look at her friend. "Fayette." "It's just," she shook her head, then grabbed Fayette's hand. We need to leave. Come, let's go. Quick. She started pulling the maid with her along the streets, almost running. She peered nervously at the nearby windows, looking for anyone who might have been watching. Fayette felt a bit off balance. Is it really that big of a problem? They had done that before, probably. Seemed used to it. Had victims. Mireille shook her head. Faye, it's not. It would be bad if we were connected to these bodies. Put that broom away, there's blood on it. Fayette slowly nodded, then slid the broom back into her apron of holding. I was just protecting me and you, right? They attacked us, can we be blamed for that? It's just. All right, Fayette, imagine you are on a trip to a manor with your liege, there's some party going on or something of the sort, and your liege is there as a guest. Fayette nodded. I'm following so far. I've been an attendant a few times. So, if you see skittering rats in there, is it all right to handle them yourself? Fayette thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, it would be very rude to the maids of that place. At most, you could inform them discreetly about what you found. So, if you just went and started clearing out rats on another maid's territory, they wouldn't be happy, right? Fayette started nodding, then paused. She stared aimlessly as she thought, then turned to Mireille. You can't be saying it's similar to this situation, right? They attacked us. It was self-defense. Okay, it's not a perfect analogy. Sorry, I can't make perfect maid analogies for everything, Faye. I'm a seamstress, not a maid. Hey, calm down there, I don't think you want to be shouting. Mireille took a few deep breaths, then sighed as she turned a corner on the streets. Sorry, you're right. In a way you could be correct, it was self-defense. Things might be cleared out officially. Eventually. She turned to Fayette. But there would be questions, and things could become very complicated. We're strangers here, Fayette. Those men might have been part of a gang or something, they might have family and friends. People who care. If word gets out, those people might come looking for us. Consequences. Fayette pulled her hand out of the seamstress's grip and frowned. Well, I'll handle those if they come. You can plan long term, but I'm a maid. It's my job to clean up the aftermath. I think we could manage. It's just a lot riskier. Just scaring them off would have probably been fine. If we show we're not to be messed with, people should steer clear. Those didn't seem to be the determined type. Are you sure about that? They would just vanish to bother some other people after us. Besides, your guy came at you swinging, seemed determined enough to me. Mireille flushed and turned away. Well, yeah. I handled that a bit poorly. I saw that you had knocked your guy out, so I tried to restrain him. Only, messing with his clothes wasn't quite enough. I didn't expect a few stitches to set him off like that. I got too into it. Too into it? That's one way to put it. Look, I was just curious on how it would work, okay? Won't exactly find live target practice too often. You're still thinking about taking the hunter path? I think you did well in that fight there. You could have potential. Mireille clicked her tongue. Well, maybe I'll consider it as an option, okay? I did actually get good experience for my class from that. Probably because of the danger? I didn't even do that much needlework. Though, I'm not locking in anything. This city, it doesn't feel too good, but I still want to check out how work here could be. I won't count anything out just yet. Fayette sped up her pace until she was right by Mireille's side and looked at her with a smug smile. Just be honest and say you can't bear to leave your dependable big sis. Dependable? You're the one who got us lost in these slums. I should be the one worried for you going out alone. I handled those two well and good, didn't I? Look, let's just find a place to rest and get some sleep. I really was not expecting to end up in deadly combat today. Ah, fine. Although she had poked Mireille's argument a bit, Fayette had to admit her friend was right. Wandering vagrants couldn't just go around killing people without proper authorization. That will make cleaning this city a lot more difficult. Maybe my original objective could solve this? If she did not have permission to go around killing things, why not get that authorization? She had originally come here for the Hunters Guild anyway, and getting a hunter's license could solve her issue. Many thought of hunters as little more than wandering vagrants, but they truly were not, because of one key difference. They actually had permission to wander around killing things. It was practically their whole job description. Fayette could imagine all the sweet experience she could get on official hunting requests. Her path to becoming the ultimate maid had never felt clearer. Become a hunter, and then get to cleaning, simple. The two walked in companionable silence for a bit as they got back to the more populated streets, and soon they were again walking among the red brick buildings. Fayette was thinking back on the fight and trying to figure how she could have handled it better. Then, she suddenly remembered a curious detail. By the way, what were those spices you threw? Mine have been missing for a while. Mireille's silence was answer enough. Chapter 17 To the Hunters Guild. The Etruscan Republic showed no hints of decay even in scriptures from as late as the year 5 BS, which makes its downfall and the subsequent millennia of Dark Ages even more tragic. Truly, the system was not gentle in its coming. Downfall of the Etruscan Republic Part 1. Eventually Fayette and Mireille managed to find an inn for themselves. It was in the grimier part of town, a slightly dilapidated place that could really use a thorough cleaning. To some that may have been a demerit, but Mireille had seen it as an opportunity. She was traveling with a maid after all. There were benefits to that sort of thing. With some snappy negotiation, the seamstress managed to negotiate a nice room for a very affordable price, on the condition that Fayette would do some cleaning work at the inn, something she was all too eager to do anyways. Fayette generally did not trust the cleaning work of others as much as her own, so it was a calming thing being able to clean for herself. They had arrived at the place at sunset, and it only took the maid 2 hours of work to tidy up their room and the inn's general facilities to passable standards. The innkeeper, a foxy-looking lady, was rather pleased with Fayette's work. Fayette decided to use that goodwill and ask for permission to use the kitchen. She had had a bit of a talk with Mireille on the topic of spice thievery and personal property. Retribution was in order. Fayette was not one to shirk from a challenge, so she was determined to convince Mireille of the glory of spice. She worked hard to make the best dish she could. In fact, her cooking efforts were so serious she was interrupted by a notification after finishing her dish. Keep up the hard work with the cooking. Progress towards next level, 45%. Fayette was surprised by the notifications. With all that had happened recently, she had almost forgotten that experience could be gained through more ordinary methods. She took the notifications as proof of her growing cooking prowess. Her dish was a type of curry made using her own special spice mix. The dish had come in from the colonies, and rapidly gained popularity among the richer households. Fayette was happy at finally being able to cook some herself, and eagerly ate her own portion. Mireille was less pleased with the dish, but she knew that she had wronged Fayette with the thievery, so she persevered. As night finally fell, the pair collapsed in their beds with full bellies, exhausted from the long day. The next morning, the pair were having their breakfast in the inn's common room. Fayette was looking through the newspaper that Mireille had bought the day before, while the seamstress was sipping on some tea. "So, what are your plans for the day?" Mireille asked after finishing her cup. Fayette set the newspaper down and thought. She only really had one thing she wanted to do in the city, so she saw no point in dallying about. "I think I'll go to the Hunters Guild right away, no point waiting around." Mireille looked at her friend with some concern. "Are you sure this is going to work out? Will they take you seriously? A maid trying to become a hunter can't be a common thing." Fayette scoffed and brought out a pouch from her pocket. She opened it and revealed a gleaming array of shiny gems. "I got these monster cores off the kobolds. They should prove I'm not playing around." If I can hunt monsters like these, can they really deny me from being a hunter? I don't think they accept hunters based on the bounties they show off. Make sure to take your papers with you, alright? It's not like in the stories, it's a proper guild, a proper organization. Guilds have rules and procedures that they have to follow. You're going to want to be prepared. I have my class license, and I don't think there's much else they could want. Hunters are hardly the type of folk who look into employment records, now are they? They wouldn't be so known for accepting outcasts if it was so difficult. Mireille still did not look convinced. Are you sure you're going to be able to handle this? I can come advise you if you want. Fayette gave Mireille a look. She really didn't appreciate the patronizing tone. I hardly need you watching over me for everything, okay? I'll handle things fine on my own. Besides, don't you have your own things you wanted to look into? Mireille sighed, then nodded. I had a talk with the innkeeper, and she said she knew some people. She was pretty happy with your cleaning yesterday, so she promised to make introductions. Well, good. I'm glad it's helping you out. Don't get into any trouble on your own now, alright? I can't always be there to bail you out. I really don't think I'm the one who is likely to end up in trouble. The pair chatted for a moment longer, before heading their separate ways. Fayette knew where the Hunters Guild was, but she had never actually been inside the place. She was feeling just a bit nervous about going to the place, but that nervousness was a small thing compared to the excitement she felt. She was finally taking a step on her new path. The day's events had only strengthened her conviction. Yes, she had gained some experience from all her cooking practice, but that had been the product of days of work. Meanwhile, she only needed to whack a few thugs on the head to get a whole load of experience for it. It was just so much more efficient. I really do have to get to cleaning this city. I'm getting close to level 15 too. I think it's almost guaranteed I'll get some uncommon class options. What I'm doing can't possibly be classified as common, now can it? She hastened her steps, and eventually found herself in front of a tall wooden lodge. It was a bit of a departure from the surrounding architecture. The buildings around it were all tall stone buildings with elegant facades, while this place alone maintained a rustic feel. A two-story timber lodge which almost felt like it had been taken from the middle of some untamed wilds and plopped right into the middle of this bustling city. It was a bit incongruous. Fayette approached the doors and flung them open. She did not stop to gawk, she wanted to be taken seriously after all, and stepped in. The inside of the place looked like a mix between a tavern and a government facility. Maybe it was a trick of the light, but the place seemed to be divided into two distinct areas. One side was dark and gloomy, a mess hall for hunters staying in the city. Gruff men were sitting around tables having hushed discussions. It was the early morning, but Fayette still spotted some tankards of ale. The hunters were varied in build, but uniform in bearing. There were no fancy mages or knights here. This was a place for people who could treat the wilds as their second home. Dark cloaks and armor, a mix of mismatched gear scrounged up from who knows where, and rusty weapons in dire need of maintenance. Not much of a glorious sight. Fayette thought the lot of them could have used a thorough wash. The other side of the hall gave a very different impression. The morning light was hitting the place just right, illuminating the clean floors, neat reception tables and orderly notice boards. Fayette nodded with appreciation. This side was more her style. It did not take her long to spot the maid cleaning the place, a wisp of a girl sweeping the grime and spilled food away as the hunters ate and drank. She faded into the background in that distinct way servants did, unless the observer was also in the field, of course. There was a certain kinship between maids. Fayette had never met the woman before, but she instantly got a picture of the circumstances. The woman took notice of Fayette, and gave a nod. One professional recognized another. They didn't need words to have a small conversation. Fayette nodded her head at the messy hunters and her meaning was clear, with a bit of contempt showing on her face. Hunters, am I right? Always making a mess. The other maid rolled her eyes. You can say that again. She then shrugged her shoulders. Still, work is work, right? Fayette nodded back, then gestured towards the reception desks. Keep at it. I'll head to my own affairs. The wispy girl also gave Fayette another curt nod, an acknowledgement, then went back to her cleaning. It was a short conversation, having taken place in the space of a few glances, but they were both professionals. A maid would not engage in idle gossip. At least not too much. Fayette walked towards the receptions on the other side of the room. Nobody took notice of her walking into the room, not until she walked to the reception on the right that was, the one marked as Hunter Affairs. A few laughs sounded out in the room, and the bored-looking receptionist, a scholar-like woman with thick-rimmed glasses, turned from a stack of papers to grimace at Fayette. The woman pointed at the other reception desk. "Excuse me, miss, requests are handled at that table." Fayette got a bit annoyed at the flippant dismissal, but she held her tongue. She knew that servicing customers could be a grating job, and she needed no enmity with this receptionist. Amiability would be key here if complications arose. She wanted to have a helpful receptionist, not an annoyed one. She activated Maid's poise and tried to look as dignified and serious as possible. "Then I think I am at the right desk. I am not here to post a request, I am here to sign myself up as a hunter." Chapter 18 Customer Service Nightmare. The receptionist had already been turning back to her papers, but Fayette's words managed to rouse her back. The woman blinked her eyes and took a proper look at Fayette for the first time. She took in the very proper maid uniform, Fayette's bearing, and at last fully registered her words. She instantly shifted to business mode, her next words curt and precise. "You wish to sign up as a hunter? May I see your class license?" Fayette took the license from her pockets and quickly looked it over to make sure things were fine. Class license: the dual monarchy of Gallia and Albia. Name: Fayette. License type: worker class. Parents: unknown. Base class: maid. Date of birth: June 5, 1767. Issued: June 5, 1781. Parish of Castella. Blood signature: Fayette. Valid until level 30. Yep, everything should be in order. Satisfied, she handed the slip over to the receptionist. The woman took a quick glance at it, then turned to examine Fayette. The maid felt a shudder as the distinctive feeling of an appraisal skill went through her. It had been a while since she had gone through one of those. Seemingly satisfied, the receptionist handed the license back. "Your information seems to be in order. Which party are you joining? I will need to ensure your vouching is in order. Do you have the recommendation written down somewhere?" Fayette felt confused. "Oh no, this is going to become bothersome, isn't it? I'm not joining any party, at least yet. I don't have any vouching either. Is that necessary? Can't I go at things alone?" The receptionist's face blanked for a moment, going through that distinctive despair one goes through when realizing they have a difficult customer at hand. It was only a moment, and she soon continued as if no pause had come, voice curt and professional. "Miss, non-combat classes are only allowed to become hunters in a support capacity. We don't manage cleaning services or anything of the sort. This is the Hunters Guild, and we handle hunter requests." Fayette frowned, then pointed at a slime cleaning request on the nearby quest board. "You don't do cleaning jobs? Then what do you call that? Cleaning sludge from a river seems cleaning-y enough to me." I see your point," the receptionist admitted, then smiled awkwardly. "Still, sorry, but I have to follow regulations with these things. We only serve hunting requests." Fayette felt irritation bubbling within her, and almost slammed her fist on the table, but she held it in. She had recognized the look on the woman's face. It was a very common one for maids too, the "I have to deal with a difficult customer" face. Fayette knew she needed to be cooperative to have any chance here. She slowly took a few breaths to make sure the anger was out of her and made her case. There was zero hesitation in her voice as it rang out. "Sorry, but I'm not trying to join in a support capacity. I want to become a proper hunter and I want to hunt proper monsters." Her calm voice seemed to pierce the noise in the room, making the place fall silent. Many strange gazes began falling on Fayette from the hunter mess hall. The receptionist's face in turn held confusion, and just a tinge of despair. "But, you are a maid. You need to have a combat class to become a hunter. That's how the rules go." Fayette smiled smugly. She had actually thought on this argument beforehand and prepared an answer. She started making her point, voice filled with confidence. "Who says a maid isn't a combat class? Do you have proof? I'm a maid, and I've fought plenty. Maid skills are great for fighting. It's not like there's a big book of all classes that says a maid isn't a combat class, right?" The receptionist's face slowly turned from confusion to sympathy. She measured her words, laying out a slow judgment. "Actually, we do indeed have a big book on class classifications which says just that. The big class classification text. It's very explicit, a maid is a worker class." Fayette stumbled as her arguments melted away into nothing, and she looked at the receptionist with shock. "You do? There's a book like that?" The woman nodded. "Yes, we do. Would you like me to fetch it? I can double-check the classification for the maid class if you want." Fayette closed her eyes and sighed deeply. It was a worst-case scenario. And I was so confident I could get them with that. Why is there such a book anyway? Who wrote it? Can't be anyone sensible, they just didn't meet the right maid. She turned to look at the receptionist. Fayette had been patient and amiable, and she could see from the woman's sympathetic look that she was no longer being classified as an annoying customer, just a difficult one. "I guess I'll see if we can work something here." "No, I don't think bringing that book out is necessary. I'll take your word on it. It's just, is there no way for me to become a hunter?" She took out her bag of monster cores and appended it on the table. "I wasn't lying about being able to hunt, all these, I too." The receptionist looked at the cores rolling around on the table and interrupted Fayette with a wave of her hand. "Miss, rules are rules. Please don't go dumping your stuff on the tables, we can't change the rules on a bounty basis." "Ah, sorry," Fayette said and quickly tucked the cores back into her pouch. "How terrible, I've made a mess." In a last-ditch effort, she even threw in a disarming smile, though her expression was plenty disarming enough on its own. "Still, is there no way?" The receptionist took a long look at Fayette's earnest expression, then thought, finger on her lip. She turned to look at the papers around her and began to dig under them, fishing out a thick book of rules. She shuffled through it, until she eventually stopped on a page. The receptionist carefully examined the page, going over it several times, then smiled. She turned back to Fayette. "Well, it would be a bit irregular, but there is technically a way." Fayette instantly brightened up. She stood straighter and leaned over the table, full of enthusiasm. "Really? There's a way? Please calm down." "Yes, there is a way, but it is a bit." The woman gave Fayette another appraising look, then drew out some papers from a cupboard. "This is a technicality, as there is no rule forbidding it. You are technically able to join on a junior hunter license. It's something intended for children who haven't unlocked their class yet. A relatively safe introduction to hunter work until they come of age and get their class." Fayette frowned. What exactly does relatively safe mean here? The receptionist dug through the pile of papers she had taken out and selected one which she placed in front of Fayette. "You would only be able to take on missions of the safest danger rating, and only ones inside the city. Are you still interested?" Fayette turned to look at the paper, which seemed to be a list of rules and regulations for junior hunters. It was a big list of things they were not allowed to do, and Fayette felt a tad angry that she was being reduced to this. "I'm being put on the same levels as children under 14 years, just because a maid isn't a combat class according to their stupid book?" Still, it was something. Was it better than nothing though? Fayette was not sure. She turned to the receptionist. If I find the junior hunter thing doesn't suit me, is there anything stopping me from just giving it up? The receptionist pointed to a line on the paper. Junior hunters are not held to any obligations. You would be free to go as you will. Fayette still wanted to be a hunter, and though this was far from what she had wished for, it was still a step. Not a big step, but a step nonetheless. At least I have some sort of license with this, it shouldn't stop me from doing any cleaning requests. Those are what I really wanted here anyways. She took the paper. All right, thanks for being patient with me. I'm in. Where do I sign? Those are the rules, not the joining form. Please don't sign anything. Oh, sorry. Fayette handed the paper back, and the receptionist handed her a new form. It took a bit more fiddling with the papers to get Fayette's forms in order. Ordinarily, permission from a guardian would be required. Luckily, Fayette was of age. She marked herself in as her own guardian. Another mix-up came as the receptionist found out that Fayette didn't actually live in the city and was only staying at an inn. The junior license was intended for locals mainly, but on closer inspection of the rules, the receptionist found that the segments on travel and such were relatively loose, allowing just enough wiggle room for Fayette's form to go through. Eventually the paper was signed, and the woman headed upstairs to verify it with the guild master. Fayette paced around in a circle anxiously as she waited, fearing that even with all her effort, the form wouldn't go through. The maid working in the guild gave her a look of solidarity, and they shared another silent conversation, mainly mocking the dirty habits of stereotypical hunters. Fayette was just getting into it, miming the drunken steps of a fool who had drunk more than they could take, when the receptionist returned. Fayette instantly fell into Maid's poise, and approached the desk, hope in her heart. The receptionist smiled at her, and handed Fayette a slip of paper, and a copper emblem. Congratulations, you are now officially a junior hunter. Fayette nodded her thanks at the diligent receptionist and took her now proof of guild membership in hand. This receptionist was a bit of a stickler for rules, but she handled things in the end. I hope she gets plenty of experience from this. With a license in hand, Fayette needed to choose what to do with it. One of her options would be to join up with some other party, but she wasn't feeling too keen on that. She had considered it briefly, but one look, one whiff, at the hunters arrayed at the other side of the room dissuaded her of the notion. They were simply too unclean. They were a grimy sort, and Fayette didn't think she would have much luck trying to whip the lot into cleaner shape. There was no way she would be joining a party of people who failed to meet her basic cleanliness standards. There was of course another issue. Fayette wasn't naive. Not completely at least. She doubted she would get to fight much if she joined one of the parties. If some party were to accept a maid as part of their group, they would probably have certain expectations on what a maid would do for the group. Fayette had no objection to handling cooking and cleaning, it was part of her duties after all, but she still wanted to primarily be a fighter. However, such musings could be left for later. Fayette now had her very own junior hunter's license, and she was keen to put it into use. She walked over to the mission board and began perusing her options. There were many different types of requests posted, requests for caravan escort, notices about dangerous monster spottings, all sorts of interesting jobs. None of which Fayette was allowed to accept, of course. She turned her gaze downwards, to the bottom of the board. Now, how can I most efficiently start cleaning up this dumpster of a city? The first notice that took her attention was a rat removal mission. Apparently some neighborhood in the city was having issues with a rat infestation, and a mission had been put forth. There was a bounty for every rat corpse verified, and though not large, it wasn't an insignificant sum either. Pest control at? That sounds right up my alley. However, as she read further on, she noticed that even this mission was marked with a danger level beyond what she was allowed. Seriously? Rats are too dangerous for me? Give me a break. I've handled plenty of rats back at the mansion. I'm sure I could handle this. Humph. Maybe I could take it anyway somehow? Grumbling internally, Fayette turned to the next mission down. This time she first checked the danger rating and noted to her satisfaction that this one was within her means. A persistent mission for slime removal, hey? I think I should be able to manage that. Still, why is there a persistent mission for something like this? A city shouldn't have slimes just popping out of nowhere, there's monster wards to keep them out, right? Apparently, the river on the northern side of town had a bit of a slime infestation problem. The creatures were constantly washing up on shore, and people were needed to clear the pests away. Fayette felt a bit unnerved that monsters could just pop up like that inside a city. Still, it seemed to be the best mission so far. Can't get much thorough cleaning done with dirty water, this should be a good start. Fayette decided to give it a go. It was time to start cleaning the city. Chapter 19 Cleaning a Slimy River. Fayette was walking through the city towards the northern river shore. As she walked, she gazed at her brand new hunter's license with some measure of pride. All right, it wasn't a proper hunter's license, it was only the junior version. It rankled Fayette to be dismissed amongst the children, but this would do for now, she would think of something when its use ran out. This mission took her to the worse parts of town, so Fayette made sure to stick to the more populated streets. She didn't want to cause too much trouble again. It was not an area for the wealthy, and it really showed in the buildings. There was no stone or brick here, only cramped one-story wood shacks. The streets still did not seem any less busy than the other districts, which made Fayette a bit concerned. If the houses are this much smaller, but the amount of people seems to be the same, just how densely are they living? Fayette kept her eyes trained to the front, as otherwise the persistent dirt and grime everywhere would have annoyed her too much. That, however, made her focus on the people. There had been beggars in the better districts, and they were here too, but something was different. These beggars were not hawking out their trades or appealing to the passers-by, they were just sitting about listlessly with glazed-over eyes. Many seemed downright sick. I guess the ones with more energy would go to the places where business is better. A quick walk later, Fayette finally made it to the river shore. There was a sort of buffer zone between the water and the city proper, with a sort of rocky beach in between. A few street urchins were watching the waters with strange poles in their hands. Fayette walked over to the river, and winced back from the stench. It smelled. How can they mess up a river this bad? She turned to look upstream and saw the distant factory district. Tall chimneys were spewing out endless bouts of smoke, and many of the factories seemed to be built right by the riverside. Gah, is nothing enough for those places? They have to billow out smoke to the skies, isn't that enough for them? Are they doing something to the water too? Fayette was brought back from her musings as she noticed movement on top of the water. It looked almost like a wave, but on closer inspection, something was different. First, the wave was tinted a lot darker than the rest of the water. Second, it was not moving with the flow or the wind, but was steadily approaching the shore. Fayette took a few steps back and pulled out her broom as a slime slithered on shore. It looked like a grayish pile of goop, but there was an order to it. It slowly started slithering closer. Fayette smiled, cleaning away living stains seemed like very proper Maid work. All right, I can see why the danger rating for this is so low. That thing is barely moving at all. Now, I just need to kill it and take the monster core along. So far, Fayette had approached combat with a single strategy: hit the enemy on the head until it died. It was a simple stratagem, but a very effective one. She had no reason to doubt it. Fayette raised her broom for a decisive strike, and slammed it at the slime with all her practiced strength. The strike hit the slime compressed, and the strike bounced right back. Fayette stumbled backwards, and looked at the slime with a new respect in her eyes. It managed to stand my blow. Not even a lord managed that. Still, that left Fayette with a conundrum. She needed to kill the slime and take its monster core, but her usual method did not seem to work. She took some distance from the slowly advancing slime as she began to think of a new plan. Wait a minute, I do have another method of attack. I haven't used it as much, but it still should be somewhere around here. Fayette began rummaging through her apron of holding, and eventually pulled out her all-purpose cleaner. She still had a bottle full of it, about 3/4 full now. If I need to clean a bit of spilled sludge, surely this will do the job. She changed her broom for a mop and applied the cleaner liberally on it. Then she slowly approached the slime, and touched it with the mop end, making sure to maximize cleaner contact. A sizzling instantly sounded out and the slime started squirming. It was an unnerving sight. Spasms went through the grey liquid in waves and the creature started backing away from the deadly mop. Fayette smiled at the good results she was having, and thrust the mop further out at the slime, making sure to get every bit of her cleaner on it. The slime backed away further, almost back into the river now. Fayette was smiling with victory when something concerning happened. The slime started changing color. It started from the portion closest to the mop. Gradually the greyish goop was being pushed back, replaced with a clear blue that was distinctly familiar to Fayette. She pulled her mop back in a panic. Is it becoming an all-purpose cleaner slime? Fayette backed away as the transformation continued, making the slime squirm and spasm about more and more. Just as the transformation seemed to be finishing, an especially strong spasm went through the creature, and it fell back into the river. Fayette watched as it was swept along with the current and kept her eyes on it until she was sure it was far beyond city limits. All right, hopefully that won't become a problem. Fayette sighed as she stepped back. Slime removal duty really wasn't starting off as well as she had hoped. However, before she could mope about further, a clear voice interrupted her. Excuse me, are you hunting slimes? Fayette turned to the voice and saw a young dark-haired woman who was carrying a bag of groceries. She had her hair in a long braid and was wearing the clothes of a simple working woman. Fayette saw no reason to hide the truth. Yes, I am a hunter after all. The woman's gaze traveled up and down Fayette's prim maid uniform, and her expression became one of doubt, even concern. Is this something your master put you up to? Fayette shook her head. I have no master anymore. I wanted to become a hunter, so that is what I did. The woman's doubt was replaced with interest. Is that really something you can just do? Maids don't have real combat skills, do they? Can you manage as a hunter? Fayette held her mop out with pride. You hardly need those so-called real combat skills to fight. Normal skills and a bit of cleverness can bring you quite far. The woman sighed. I wish I had the confidence for something like that. We've been having a rat issue, but no hunters have accepted our quest. It would be nice if I could tackle things like that on my own. This time it was Fayette whose face turned interested. You know about the rat problem? I was having a look at that mission. Do you know who posted it? Oh, it was a whole bunch of neighborhood folk, my mother included. The problem has only been getting worse though. Fayette saw an opportunity. She looked back to the river, a filthy, slime-infested stream next to it, grimy streets lined with sickly beggars, and behind it all, high, atop the ridge, the factories which set the backdrop of the city, billowing out endless streams of smoke. She saw a futile effort. It was a mistake to start with this. Even if clear out slimes here all day, it won't matter at all as long as I don't deal with the source of these slimes. If one starting point proved a dud, why not try a different one? The rat mission seemed like a promising start. Rats carry grime around and people say they spread diseases. Would they work as a start for my cleaning? A thorough cleansing effort needs a sturdy foundation, so why not start by clearing that foundation of rats? If the guild wouldn't let her take the mission, why couldn't she just directly go to the people who had posted the mission in the first place? She stood straighter and gave the woman a proper curtsy. I am the hunter Fayette, miss. I might be interested in taking the mission, but I would like to do it outside official channels. The woman smiled. She seemed to want to answer her curtsy, but her hands were a bit full with the bags, so she settled for a curt nod of the head. I'm Elise, a laborer at the textile mill. I can take you to talk with my mom if you want to. Fayette agreed eagerly and set off to follow the woman. They chatted a bit as they walked, with the conversation mostly being Elise's questions about Fayette's exploits. She seemed very interested in Fayette's talk of battle. The maid suspected the woman might have aspirations of her own in that direction. Fayette decided to be encouraging and told her how it didn't matter what one's class was, as long as you had proper fighting spirit you could manage. The laborer grew especially interested when Fayette told her about the quick levels she was getting. The woman didn't live in the worst part of the slums, but it was certainly not a luxurious place either. She led Fayette closer to the factories, and after a short walk they arrived at her humble abode, a simple one-story wooden house. The laborer opened the door. Hey everyone! I'm back with a guest. Wait, you already have a guest here, who is this? Fayette followed Elise in and was surprised by what she saw within. Mireille was sitting at a table with a woman who was probably an older sister of Elise's, drinking tea. The two locked eyes for a split second, before they both laughed. Elise looked at them, puzzled. Mireille was the one who first managed to settle herself. Well, this is certainly a coincidence. What brought you here? She gestured at the woman who was seated with her. Ange here is a seamstress, and she showed me around her workplace. The woman nodded at Fayette and Fayette nodded back. I managed to join the Hunters Guild, and I just happened to meet Elise while I was doing some slime hunting. She's got information on a rat hunting mission. Mireille nodded at Elise. I see, how much is the pay? Fayette brought her finger to her face as she thought. I think, it was around 1 livre for every 2 rat corpses. Mireille's eyes started gleaming. Tell me more. Chapter 20 Pest Control. Mireille and Fayette took a moment to explain themselves to their bewildered hosts, and soon the whole group were sitting by the table, sipping on tea. Somehow, the roles had reversed, and Fayette had become the one serving the tea, fetching more, and ensuring everyone got their refills. Their hosts were a bit bewildered by the turn, but something about Fayette's professional bearing calmed them, and they began discussing things in earnest. It was a cramped room, a shared kitchen in a house with many families in it. Right now, they had the room to themselves, as the other families seemed to be away. As Fayette had expected, the other woman, Ange, was Elise's older sister. She was apparently an acquaintance of their innkeeper's, and had arranged for Mireille to be brought along to survey her workplace. So, how did you like the place? Do you think you want to work there? Fayette asked her after the explanation was finished. Well, Mireille turned a guilty expression to Ange. No offense to you, but I didn't really end up liking what I saw. Even were I given a chance, it's not something I'll be keen to try. She met Fayette's eyes and shook her head slightly. They would talk more on this later. Oh, don't worry about offending by speaking the truth. The older woman said, laughing. Circumstances are as they are, so I can definitely understand if you don't jump at the opportunity. Mireille nodded back at the woman, then continued. It was much gloomier and denser than I had expected. I'm surprised the heat and steam don't ruin the fabrics. The foreman has skills that keep such ill environmental effects in check. It lets the production continue smoothly no matter the conditions. Ange explained. Fayette shuddered. That doesn't sound like a pleasant skill, to be honest. If my old head maid had something like that. I shiver to imagine what she would have made us do. She turned to Mireille. So, now you're interested in hunter jobs? The seamstress nodded. At this point, becoming hunters with you doesn't seem like the worst option. If the pay is good, why not? Fayette's face beamed into a smile. You're becoming a hunter with me. I knew you would come around. I'm not becoming a hunter yet, I'm just giving this one job a try, all right. Wait. Elise interrupted. She turned a curious look to Mireille. A seamstress is becoming a hunter too? Can she also fight? Fayette, can she blast away kobold hordes like you can? Mireille looked between the two, narrowing her eyes. Fayette, what exactly have you been telling her? Nothing but the truth. Fayette said with a beaming smile. She nudged Elise at the side and pointed at Mireille. And don't worry, she can handle herself well too. Why, just yesterday, she stitched a thug's arm to his. Hey! Watch what you go blabbering about. Fayette brought her hands to cover her mouth. Oh! Right. Don't talk about the incident. Right. I almost forgot. Still, it was too late. Elise's eyes were already shining. A maid and a seamstress who can handle thugs with ease. Do you think a laborer could fight too? What? Mireille stammered, surprised by the sudden look of admiration. I guess. It depends on the skills. Elise was opening her mouth to ask more, when suddenly a severe glare from her sister shut her up. Elise! What on earth are you thinking up? Get such foolishness out of your head. She answered the glare with her own. Hey, you're not my mom. These two are admirable women, holding their own with nothing but cleverness. Fayette and Mireille looked at each other, feeling a bit awkward at suddenly being put in the middle of a family spat. However, the argument didn't get much further before a door opened, and a woman dressed in black walked in. A stench of medicine came with the opening of the door, and the woman closed it behind her as soon as she had stepped through. The woman looked gloomy. Dark clothes, dark hair, and above all, dark eyes. Her eyes were ringed with black, seeming to sink down into her head. The woman looked like she hadn't properly slept for a good while. Ah, Dr. Nightingale, you are finished with your checkup? Ange asked, rising up from her seat. The woman looked towards them, and Fayette shivered. Her expression was just as gloomy as the rest of her bearing. The situation was the same as it was the day before. Keep giving her the medicine, that's all I can do. Elise rose up too, and bowed together with her sister towards the doctor. Thank you for your time, we know how busy you've been. The woman said nothing more, and strode outside. A distinct smell of alcohol emanated out as she passed. Elise turned to Fayette. Right, you wanted to ask Mother about the rat mission. Well, she fell ill a few days ago, but should be well enough to see visitors. Shall we go? Fayette briefly locked eyes with Mireille, who looked thoughtful. Is it contagious? The seamstress asked. No, at least the doctor didn't think so. Something else is spreading it, maybe even the rats we mentioned. Ange answered. Mireille looked to Fayette, then shrugged. Well, guess there's no harm in it. Please lead the way. The two sisters rose up from the table to lead the group into an adjacent room. Fayette and Mireille followed them in, and a strong stench of medicine instantly hit their noses. Fayette recoiled initially, but with the help of Maid's poise she steadied herself and headed in. It was a cramped bedroom, but Fayette's eye was not drawn to the clutter or disorder strewn about in the room. No, her gaze instantly went to the woman resting on the bed. She was an older woman, clearly a likeness to the two sisters. Her age was hard to gauge as her complexion looked very sickly, skin like yellowed paper and a body trembling with sweat. An orderly knot of brown hair and wizened features fought their way through the sickly complexion. She fell ill just a few days ago, a lot of folk have. Some have talked about an epidemic, but the doctor we had visit didn't think so, said it might be from the water or the rats. Elise walked to the side of the bed, and softly spoke into the woman's ear. Hey, Mom, are you awake? We have a guest, someone's here about the rat mission. The woman's eyes opened, and with labored breath, she slowly rose up from the bed. She took a moment to gather herself, and slowly looked over her visitors. Her eyebrows quirked a bit at their outfits, but she didn't ask any questions about it. A mark of experience. You two are here for the mission? I'm glad someone accepted it. Hunters usually think pest control is beneath them. Fayette sniffed. Then the lot of them are fools. Pest control is an important duty, and its neglect really shows the depravity of a household. Not that your household is lacking or anything, of course. The woman chuckled. Now, things are as they are, no need to sugarcoat it. You speak quite right. There have been some right nasty rats about, tearing into people's food. Nobody's managed to catch one of them, and some cats were even found dead. Mireille walked forward, quirking an eyebrow. These sound like some extraordinary rats. Are there any details? The woman looked at her daughters questioningly, but they shook their heads. She sighed. Doesn't seem like anybody's managed to catch hold of any. It's the reason the bounty is as high as it is and the danger rating, we don't really know what we're dealing with. Fayette clapped Morel on the shoulder and gave the old woman an encouraging look. Don't worry, this sounds like a job right up our alley. My friend is an experienced trapper, and I know my way around rat poison. I think we'll be able to handle this. The woman smiled. Well, I'm certainly glad someone's finally taking matters into hand. With any luck, the sickness will be gone with the rats too. The woman started to get out of bed, then grimaced. I'm afraid I'm still a bit too ill to host you further. My daughters should be able to tell you everything you need to know for the job. Don't worry, Mom, I'll help them out. Elise said. Then I think I'll get back to my rest, these old bones need a bit more sleep. Fayette and Mireille thanked the older woman and stepped back into the kitchen. What do you think, Mireille? Do you want to do this? Sounds simple enough. I can make snares and traps, I could probably catch some rats. I've got some ideas of my own too. Let's do it. Below the city, far underneath the cobblestone roads and storm drains, a transformation was happening. The first was feasting. It thought of itself as the first, for it was the first of its kind, the first to discover their treasure, that sweet ambrosia of power. It had not been a willing discovery, for like most living creatures, it had felt an instinctive revulsion for the substance. A crumbling bit of stone had done it, a trick of fate, and it had been dropped within the sickly. It drank deep, discovered the pleasure in it, and changed. It was no longer alone. Its kin had needed convincing, but eventually they drank too, and also began to change. The first was of course first among them in power too, and thus, it was the first to discover the next stage. It had feasted on dogs and cats from above, gorged itself full on its weaker kin, and drank of that ambrosia. It reached a new limit, and broke through. Once more its form began changing, and it could feel its power growing. This transformation would take some time, so it sat down to rest. Once it awoke, it would be time to expand.